Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. How are you all doing? My name's Eric Beasing. As I think Ben mentioned, I'm a partner in our customer service operations practice. I actually look after that practice globally. We are going to, I'll let Josh, my colleague, introduce himself in just a second, but what we're going to hope to do here is we have about 45 minutes, and I realize this is before lunch. We're going to spend about maybe 30 minutes sharing some of our research as well as some of our thinking on generative AI. And then we're going to open it up to questions. Can't promise we'll have all the answers, but we can certainly share things that we're observing in the servicing space across all of our clients. So if you have questions that you'd like to ask, please think about those. Do I need to turn pages myself? Okay, great. You want to introduce yourself, Josh?
Sure. I'm Josh Wolf. I'm also partner McKinsey based in New York. I work with Eric in customer care and also across marketing and sales, so to bring together the revenue side of the story as well as the care side.
So what we wanted to start with is, I think you heard, is our state of care report. So to give some context of what this is. Every 18 to 24 months, we do our own independent research. This is either survey-based or interviewing executives within the customer service operations sphere. So these are P&L owners, chief customer officers, chief experience officers, COOs. And the questions that we ask are around, what are you challenged with right now? And what are your priorities for the next 12 to 24 months? Not what does 10 years look like? Literally, what are you focused on? And we're about to release the report, so you're going to get an early preview. And I'll spend maybe 10, 15 minutes sharing some of the highlights. Then Josh will talk a bit about how we're seeing generative AI in the servicing space really start to emerge and disrupt. So there were three themes that we heard initially from the executives on where they were challenged. And the first one was CX is always important. How do I raise the bar on CX? But also efficiency is important too. And you'll see in a moment, this idea of do it all now is more important than ever. There were times when you could make decisions on, well, we'll increase containment in the IVR, and we'll take a bit of a hit on CX. But now the expectations are a lot different. So that's the first challenge. The second was the history of technology not necessarily delivering what the executives hoped it would. One of the executives that I work with made a joke. He said, I'm losing a lot of money on all of this tech savings that I've been investing in. Because in many cases, the technologies aren't delivering on time, or they're not achieving full value. And there's a lot of reasons for that. Reasons could be change in priorities or investment wanes or attention gets put in other places. But the truth is, from a delivery standpoint, technology hasn't always been realized in the contact center in the way that it was promised. And then the third was we still have a business to run, right? We still have a function that we still have to answer the phones or answer chats. How do we still do this while we're trying to be an innovator at the same time? And that's hard because there's pressures on the business to be efficient. Budgets get cut. Handle times get pressure. How do you operate in both? So there were, of this survey, there were four major themes that came out that we'll share with you today. And the first really was what we're calling a reprioritization to the core fundamentals. The past 3 years was tumultuous for the contact center. Right? In some cases, it was just get people home. But slowly, a new norm started to emerge. Are we hybrid? Are we in person? Are we fully remote? And in each of those environments, how do we create the best contact center possible? And so, where 21 and 22, we saw less of a focus on efficiency. What we're hearing now and what we saw in our latest survey was it's time to rethink. And for those of you that are in the servicing function, this is never something that you're finished with. You're always looking at operational efficiency. So the first was around how do we improve our operations? You can see a couple of things here. One is half of the survey respondents, and this was about 300 executives, said, I want to focus on efficiency over the next 1 to 2 years. Second, which we thought was interesting, was we expected call volumes to go up, right? So there has been a promise of more, calls coming down, digital kind of migrating out. 10 years ago, there was conversations on the death of the contact center. In some cases, we are seeing volumes come down in some industries. but in many, actually, volumes are going up. They're going up because interactions are going up. As a percent of total interactions, digital has a much larger share, but all interactions have been rising. And so how do you think about that? And are the interactions changing? They're probably more complex. They're probably like a different question or a more complicated question given the different assets and entry points that a customer starts in. And then the third is multidimensional. You have more entry points and assets, as I talked about, than ever before. Right? You might be coming in from asynchronous chat, you might be coming in from chat, you might be coming in from a chat bot, you could be coming in from voice to voice soon. So how do all of these work together when you have a live interaction? So some of the initiatives that we are seeing our clients think about on the right-hand side are relooking at all of the levers. And maybe in this case, it's a spin on generative AI or AI. How is that going to transform how we think about the prioritization of initiatives? Real-time performance analytics. Right? So 15 minutes after an interaction, maybe that's too late. How are we using the information to nudge our frontline employees right from the start in the interaction live to help them have a better experience, better for CX, better for handle time, better for efficiency, better for employee engagement? The second major theme, and this probably isn't a surprise, but the question of what is AI going to do? And in our interviews, we heard a lot of things on how do I separate what's established and proven, show me precedent, versus what's vaporware. I want to be ready for it. I want to be ready for where AI might be moving. But I also don't want to be the first use case for something. So the question really was, how do we become future ready for AI? And Josh will talk a bit about some of the types of things that we're seeing in generative AI in the servicing function that organizations are thinking. But there are some things, and AI is a broad, generic term. There are some things that we're seeing that are staple and baked. Workforce management is a huge disruption and proven. Right? The ability to consume much more data, forecast more accurately, to create schedules that better meet supply, to even rethink how we nudge frontline reps using AI as well. So some of the initiatives that we're seeing here are really around co-pilots in chat, voice to voice, right? And in certain industries, even more exciting than others. Utilities is one that I'm working in where there's a real push to move to voice. Very few people want to talk to their utility companies. When you do, it's probably not something very exciting. It's either lost power, you're signing up for service, or you're canceling service. So how do we think about reimagining those interactions? And voice intelligence. This is moving well beyond speech to text into how are we taking insights from every interaction and using those to nudge either during the interaction or in a post-interaction. How are we inspiring individuals differently? So, Josh gets inspired as a contact center rep by being told that he's not doing well enough, that he's falling behind his peers. And so week over week, he gets pushed. And so how does AI then help nudge him in a way that motivates him because his FCR is falling behind? But maybe I'm different. Maybe when I feel like I'm falling behind, I fall behind further. Maybe I need to be nudged with wins every day. Like you're doing 10% better than yesterday, keep it up. And there's a lot of ways you can hyper-personalize the interactions with your employees, frontline and back office, to really drive performance. The third major theme was reimagining the servicing network altogether. A lot of the clients that we work with will have some form of onshore, offshore, captive, and outsourced. And for too long, and especially some of my large telco clients, there's been this concept of us versus them. Right? You have the in-house, you have the outsourced, and those two shall never get along. The idea here, though, is how do we think of a new servicing network? How do we think about our BPO partners as strategic partners, not adding maybe just labor arbitrage, but capabilities? And how do we route differently? This idea of hyper-personalization side. How do we think about getting the customer to the right interaction, the right time? In some cases, it might be self-service. It might be a voice bot. It might be a chat bot. And in some cases, it might be a human. And then the fourth theme was around people. So in our last survey, which happened in 2022, the themes around people were around holding on to people. Because contact centers, people, they just couldn't get enough, and agents were getting multiple offers and good stories of just ghosting, showing up for the first day, realizing they didn't like it, and just going to the other job. What we've seen now is a shift more towards upskilling, right? If you believe in the narrative that a lot more interactions are going to go digital, then what's left is more complex. And so do we need a problem solver? Do we need a journey manager? Do we need somebody who can really understand the history of the interaction up to that point and help the customer in a different way? So how do we upskill? And then and importantly, how do we build and onboard and train in a new environment, especially if we're hybrid or remote? How can we think about technology to help get a rep to proficiency a lot faster? So AI is playing an interesting role here. Voice to voice, playing customers, training employees on the systems and the soft skills required to be good for CX, all at the same time. Those were the major themes. So my last page is going to be a bit about showing the history, and I'm just going to show it all at once. So what we did this year was we looked across the last 4 surveys that we've done. We've done it around like I mentioned, every 18 to 24 months. Said, well, what have been the themes? How is contact centers and the priorities in contact centers in the servicing function, which includes back office, how has this been changing? And I think a couple of interesting things emerged here. One is the black line on top is CX. That's always been important. That I don't think we've seen really much of a shift there. That's important. I mean, that's the whole function in and of itself, to make sure that we're providing the best experience that we can to the caller. The blue and the gray lines, those came together and they grew. This is both technology and the priority of improving efficiency. And they came together in our last survey, but they've accelerated. And we look at this as the promise, as you see it, the comment there on the right, do everything and do it all. The promise of how can technology actually improve our efficiency in our operations. And maybe we don't need to think about these separately. And then I find the bottom line to be one of the most interesting, which is this concept of expansion of what the servicing function could be. Right? We call it revenue generation here. Sometimes it's service to sales, sometimes it's loyalty. The idea of, can we use that interaction, or can we take more advantage of that interaction to provide a better experience? Maybe expand more, cross-sell, upsell, or help customers realize they're not taking advantage of the services that they already have. This has been on a steady growth. And I think this trend is going to continue, because contact centers are moving away from a transactional environment where I need to get you off the phone as quickly as I can to, this is a live touch point with a human being. How do we get the most value out of it for that individual and for the organization? So there's a lot more. There's, we're McKinsey, we have 150 pages behind this that has all of the details, and we're happy to share that more in detail or answer questions, but I'm going to pass it to Josh now to move into the sphere of AI.
Awesome, thank you. So when we found out that we were speaking after OpenAI, I said, please, not right after OpenAI. Do not make me try to talk about Gen AI after OpenAI. So instead, before lunch and after Camille. Thank you, guys. That's perfect slot for us. So we're going to talk about, let's call it Gen AI in the customer service operations context, which is the place that Eric and I live. So sure, OpenAI may have a lot of brilliant things to say about the tech itself, but this is contextually about how we're actually seeing this deployed right now and where we see things going. So first of all, we see all kinds of really awesome new capabilities coming up, and I think this is right now in the air we breathe, in the news we read, and certainly in the conversation so far around the capability of AI to help take difficult data and interpret it very quickly. We already saw, again, right before us, thank you, an amazing demo of a real human-like conversation that's now possible. And all of this can be done in ways that greatly reduce the kind of burden that it takes to manually create the sorts of models to create the kind of connections that we're now able to do almost immediately in AI. What does this mean in customer service operations? Well, do we have a large and completely unstructured data set in customer service operations? Yes, we do. Huge amounts of data, call intense, employee behaviors, customer behaviors, all kinds of data that if there were only some way to pull it together meaningfully, we would dramatically be able to improve personalization of the experience, resolution of the experience, CX overall. We've got it. We have customers who are already expecting a very human-like experience. So a very difficult thing to automate, but an expectation that is there that, again, AI now really opens the door for us. And we have all manner of channels and touch points that we need to address. So that scalability makes this a particularly exciting opportunity. So what does this actually mean is how we think about the customer experience? How does it actually get transformed? Well, the first thing that is critical is how the customer is coming in to us. And we know that even in phone calls, about 3/4 of the time, our customers are beginning the experience in some kind of digital channel. So the opportunity to engage in a digital channel in the way that we would in a voice channel, if we could more quickly provide an effective and personalized solution, is fantastic. So one possibility is we use this technology to make sure that we get a hyper-personalized touch point for the customer, even before they come to the contact center and what we would consider to be sort of a traditional assisted contact. Second is that we know that these dialogues can be enabled by AI in a whole variety of ways. So if it's not something that is just automated away, but it comes into the contact center, we believe that about 90% of the time, there will be some AI touch point that can be helped use to resolve that. So that could be Copilot, it could be AI-based knowledge bases. As Eric was talking about before, in the background, we already have very successful efforts to use AI to really improve upon workforce management and forecasting. So 90% of the time, we anticipate there will be some AI in use, even if we're down to a place where it's not a fully automated contact. This includes the agent copilots I was just talking about, and knowledge bases. And then in the next step down, once the contact has been resolved, there's a tremendous opportunity to automate what is otherwise tends to be very manual resolution processes in the background. So we see tremendous opportunity there as well. So right from the start of, think of the traditional customer care funnel, from the start all the way down to resolution, we see AI coming in throughout. So we've been talking about with our clients about, well, and I think this question has already come up today, is now the time? Not surprisingly, we also think the answer is yes. We have what we describe as 3 reasons to invest here, and I think these will probably resonate with most of these. First, and Camille raised this one as well, and Eric was showing it in our trends data as well, if you feel any fundamental pressure on productivity and quality in customer care. And all of us feel that all the time, so no question. Second, since generative AI is now moving the whole technological frontier, the whole paradigm is going to shift. So whether you feel like it's quite time or not, your customers are already going to be experiencing this paradigm shift everywhere else. And as I often remind my clients in specific sectors, your customers are not comparing you to other players in the sector. They are comparing you to their best customer experience in any sector. And so as this paradigm shifts, we will have no choice but across the board to meet customers where they expect us to be. And lastly, we will start seeing real competitive pressure building around here. So, in the near term, I think we're mostly seeing use cases where people are excited about automation, taking cost out, maybe improving capability, but this is going to very rapidly become a major competitive advantage for players that are really good at this. They will be able to take cost out, they will be able to reinvest it in better and better experiences, and they will start putting real distance between themselves and players that are not moving along as this paradigm shifts. So we wanted to talk to you a little bit about what we are seeing from the customer care survey that Eric was talking about that's specific to this. You can tell there's a human in the loop on this slide because there should be a G before enerative. We had a disagreement, External Affairs and I, about whether it was a capital G or not, and then I fixed the slide by apparently deleting the G. So imagine there's a G there. So we're seeing at least 80% of organizations are telling us that growth in generative AI for internal uses is a top priority, even now. So pretty much everybody is on board. The use cases themselves are frankly a little bit more distributed than we expected to find. We sort of thought that you would see something like chatbots, which is top of this list, customer self-service and text bots, to just be the top priority for pretty much everybody. Just take the volume out. What we're actually seeing right now still is quite a bit of distribution. With customer intelligence, how do I use this unstructured voice intelligence data as the number 2 use case? And personalization 3, getting down to those knowledge bases. 4, Copilot is way down at the bottom, which I think also was a little bit of a surprise. If I had to bet, I would have bet chatbots cleaning up Copilot second. So the distribution really suggests that there is not a widespread point of view yet about which of these use cases is most immediately the one to invest in. And we also see quite a number of challenges in how companies are adapting to using this technology. I believe Gadi referred to this earlier in his discussion. One of the biggest problems is just how do you scale this? So we see proofs of concept everywhere, but difficulty moving into actual production. We see a lack of AI maturity and governance, which probably, by the way, is feeding also the problem of getting out and scaling existing technologies in the way, et cetera. So there's still quite a bit of challenges in the way.
Hey, Josh, just one point here. And we were having this debate with the Replicant team. Their first comment here in the middle was, hey, voice-to-voice is here. Right? Where's voice-to-voice? And I think there's two things that we, from our perspective. One is there's still a lot of education required to imagine and set the aspiration of how voice-to-voice could change the servicing function. That's one. But two, since this survey was run, we ran this in April or May of this year, till now, the pace of conversations around voice-to-voice is 10x, maybe more. So it talks about how quickly this technology is moving. In fact, in the past week alone, I've had 3 client conversations just on, hey, is voice-to-voice real? And what would the spheres and phases look like to actually introduce it? So, even this could be dated 5 months, 4 months, right? That's how quickly things are happening.
The big question that we always talk with our clients about is, okay, what is this actually worth? And actually following Eric's point, this is also probably out of date. I'll give you a specific example as we go down the side here. So, we have 4 use cases that we are seeing most commonly. The first, which is in some ways one of the easiest to do, is in using Gen AI to automate after-call work. You can take a ton of time out, and it has the tremendous advantage that there's very little risk in your engagement with the customer. Customer doesn't see the AI. Of course, if the AI makes some terrible mistake, it might affect the next interaction with that customer when someone checks the notes. But for the most part, this allows our agents to get out of the tedious work of taking notes after calls and just move ahead to the next call. And we think you can probably take 50 to 60% of after-call work out with that kind of automation. The next is around optimizing and improving knowledge. Knowledge bases are a huge headache practically everywhere we work. They are both essential and also usually neglected, difficult to navigate, difficult to get the right information out of. The more you can use AI to accelerate not just your access to knowledge, but also the way that knowledge is updated. And we saw obviously a stunning example of this in the Replicant demo just 2 speakers ago. The more you can take time out of handle time. So we believe, we're talking about something like a 10% improvement in handle time. I would add there, not on this page, is employee satisfaction. You could probably add under each of these. Nobody loves searching the knowledge base for something while someone is waiting and they're vamping in their conversation. So I think that's an important driver here as well. Agent Copilot, we believe the potential to improve handle time is probably around 10 to 15%, which is in line, I think, with what Gadi was also saying earlier. I would add, also not on this page, but important, is what happens to the handle time that's left. Agent Copilot also has potential to improve yield and revenue in conversations, as well as just speeding them up. So there's potentially more here than just that 10 to 15% in time. And then customer-facing bots. We have 20 to 30% on this page. McKinsey has released other research that says 80%. And I think the real question here is not whether Eric and I are right and our partners are wrong, but which timeline we're talking about. I believe McKinsey's 80% number was 80% of contact center jobs will be automated away within the next, I think it's 5 to 10 years, was what the data was saying. And I think this point has come up already today. 5 to 10 years is now starting to feel maybe like too long a timeline. So, ask us again in 6 months, is 20 to 30% right? Might be a much higher number in the near term. And then lastly, we would never talk with our clients about doing any of this in AI without making sure that we talked about some of the risks involved. We won't go into tremendous detail here, but I want to make sure that, we continue to flag these issues, and the OpenAI conversation covered off these as well. This has to be central to the thinking. How do you keep bias from creeping in? Not just a bot that is explicitly racist, which is obviously a problem, but a bot that is not trained on all of your customers' needs, that has some sort of implicit bias, could end up hurting your business, even if it's not in the kind of obvious disasters that we're seeing kind of in early AI releases. Regulatory is a huge issue for our clients, especially in regulated industries. And I think there's some thinking of, well, we're not even going to touch anything customer-facing in a regulated industry, or we can't do anything that involves customer data in a regulated industry. I suspect leading players will start figuring out how to navigate some of those hurdles very carefully. So it's not, a total wall, but it's definitely an issue to think about. Interpretability, closely connected here, continues to be an issue. The AI gave us a great answer, but we don't know how we got to it, especially important if you have to meet compliance obligations and are concerned about bias. Keeping humans in the loop for oversight and accountability will continue to be absolutely critical. And of course, making sure that we're getting it right will continue to be an issue as well. So I know that we're before lunch, but we left a few minutes to answer any questions you have. And I think someone's out there with a mic, although it's not a very big room, so we could probably figure it out. Any questions we can address?
So you shared a lot of pathways that folks in this room could get to deploying AI into their spaces. Is there an iterative approach or a first approach that you would recommend that they take?
Yeah, so we probably both have a view on this. We have encouraged our clients to take an iterative approach, get moving, because it's going to take time to build the muscle and build up the capability, and waiting for a perfect answer is not the way to stay on top of this. So instead, find use cases where you can make a very clear business case. I think there's a page we didn't include in this deck. We have a big warning page about, don't just randomly throw stuff out there. Pick proof of concept and early use cases where there is actually a supporting business case so that you could scale that thing, but get moving on figuring out what those cases are and how to start investing and iterating on them.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with that more. I mean, and regardless of whether you're going to build this organically, build the muscle in your organization, or you're going to partner with somebody to build it, that's a skill to develop, either managing and working with vendors or building the technical acumen within your organization. So with 100% an iterative approach. And you won't go right. You won't get it right. We have launched generative AI in our own organization, and I've launched it with clients. And some of the first iterations aren't perfect. They aren't, right? But maybe the fourth one will be, the fifth one will be. So I think it's a muscle you develop.
Sai Vishnu Butler from HIPAA. So I saw the use case slide, which is probably the most exciting slide for me as a product guy. Customer service and bots. 23% said that would be where Gen AI is going to be used the most. What were the challenges? Did you hear anything about the challenges, or at least current state, what they're seeing? What were the core challenges?
I want to make sure I understand your question. Is it the challenges in introducing bots?
Introducing, exactly. For that use case, which is probably like low-hanging fruit.
Yeah. Well, I can share some examples from my clients. And by the way, they're using bots, in upfront in chat, but they're also using assistants, which is like a generative AI co-pilot side by side with the reps as well. And the challenges in their deployments have been probably not what you would expect. One was timeline, to getting it out quickly. And in this case, they built their chatbot with a vendor, and they built the co-pilot organically in-house. The second was the term, got to use hallucination, right? Which is, and hallucination can mean a lot of things. There's, using language that's just inappropriate, and it doesn't have to be offensive, right? It could be, hey, you're applying for, I see you want to apply for this credit card application. It's the greatest decision you'll ever make in your life. Okay, well, that's a misinterpretation of how important that event is. That's also hallucination. So really understanding context is, in one case, that's getting, that's a challenge that they've faced. I think a third is just how long it's taking and the effort of what it was taking to do that. I had a fourth one. I don't know if you have a comment. My fourth one will come back to me.
I don't. I do want that credit card, though.
There's a lot. I mean, it's still an iterative process. I have no doubt that it's going to stay. Yeah.
Who owns the outcome?
Yeah. That's a great question. And I also think it varies, my personal opinion, by industry, right? In regulated industries, I mean, a lot of the banks that I work with are just now getting comfortable moving to a cloud environment. This is things that other organizations were doing 10 years ago. There's a couple of answers. One is you can create private instances, right? With these large language models through OpenAI, through Cohere, through others. And so one is you can create your own environment. Two, in a lot of cases, organizations are starting internally versus external, right? So an example is a telco company. They have a lot of interactions where their field technicians are out and they need to call into a help desk to disposition a line or perform some function. In this case, they're trying to use voice-to-voice generative AI because it's not customer-facing. It's all contained. It's all organic, internal. And they're playing around with it a little bit more aggressively because they're not unleashing it or unloading it to the customer first. So I think there's different ways to approach it, but that is a topic that I think is still up for debate. Where does the data reside? Who owns that data? Who has rights to that data to look, as you heard from the OpenAI team, to ensure there's no bias and looking for bad behaviors, but in general, to mine that data? These are questions that are still being, I think, discussed.
You mentioned the one of the biggest challenges for customers is moving from POC to production. I tap on our shoulder, said this never happened to us, but I'm curious why, in your opinion, or based on the data you have, it happens in other cases. Is it organization readiness or is it vendors selection? And then the second question I want to ask, if you have a minute, is what are some of the tips you want to give people here to build internal conviction in the organization to move and invest in AI?
Maybe Josh, you answer the second one, and I'll answer the first one, or I'll do my best. I loathe the term POC. I'm tired of it because POC, in my opinion, feels a bit like we're going to try, but we're really not going to commit. Right? We're not going to commit the resources we need, the capacity we need, the attention we need to really see this thing at scale. And what happens, I think, in a lot of POCs, because they're underinvested, people poke holes and they point fingers. Well, it hallucinated too much. It didn't really get it right. That language didn't seem appropriate. I can't see how it could scale across 50 of my queues. So therefore, we're going to move on to the next thing. maybe for some organizations that's right, and maybe moving on was the right thing. But I think if you're really going to invest in this, you have to think like an entrepreneur. I have a very good friend who is now on his 6th startup, and he defined entrepreneur not as this idea in the company that he was starting, but a series of failures to get to a success. And so if you're really looking to invest in this, I would move well beyond POC and have a vision from the start of how this thing scales. And it comes down to, I think, Josh's point before, which I fully agree with, which is don't try to go build everything. Do one thing really well and all the way down to the end outcome metrics, and then maybe do a second thing. And then maybe your catabolic rate will increase. You'll be able to do 2 things at once, and then maybe 3 things at once. But trying to take on 4 generative AI use cases and all build POCs and hope that 1 of 4 work, I don't know, I haven't seen that model work as well.
Yeah, I remember the metaverse.
I'm still invested in it with my NFTs. So.
A year ago, every client wanted to talk about the metaverse. What are we going to do in the metaverse? How amazing is the metaverse? Shouldn't we be in the metaverse? And if you actually went to the metaverse, you would immediately realize, like, oh no, this is not really happening right now. AI is the opposite of that. Right? If you actually sit down with some of these tools, or like the demo that Gotti shared with us before, it's definitely like a holy shit moment for most leaders. So my recommendation to build conviction in your organization is to get smart, learn as much as you can about what the specific opportunities are for you and your organization, and then find examples that you can share. Get your hands dirty actually using these tools, and get your fellow senior leaders actually using these tools, because it's impossible not to see. This is not the metaverse. This is not our thing of the year. We won't be back with something completely different next year. We'll be back next year as hologram bots, because Eric and I will be probably already retired or something. But it really is a earthquake relative to the sort of usual, oh, this is the next thing. I think this time it is truly different. And the best way to experience that is to actually engage in it. And we have seen a whole variety of senior executives reach out to the firm who are taking classes in AI, like CEOs doing online courses to better understand transform models and opportunities in AI. As Eric was saying, we built our own internal AI engine using our own data so that consultants can access knowledge using AI. I'm sure it will speed things up a little bit for us on making some pages at some point, but the far more important thing is we realize as a firm, if we're going to be out there talking about this and helping our clients with this, we have to be using it. And so creating something that we could iterate on and start using as a firm was considered really important. So that would be my major headline, would be get engaged and try to bring your senior leaders with them.
Thanks again for that perspective. I have a question. What's your take on the healthcare industry as to how is generative AI going to transform healthcare from end to end? Well, that's a broad question.
You want to take that one?
Yeah, that's a very broad question.
That's a big question for just before lunch. I'll give you my, I'm not a healthcare expert. I do some work in healthcare. I am particularly interested in patient experience side of this. And what I am already seeing is patient experiences will be more and more like customer experiences, which is an amazing thing. I think we were already talking today about some of the potential to increase access in places where doctors are not available or where diagnostics can be accelerated. I think those are all amazing, but strictly from a care perspective, what I'm already seeing signs of is expectation of we can personalize this experience more. We can use all the kinds of tools we're talking about to make it faster, smoother, and more accessible for patients. So that is my hope from the care perspective. The broader question about how it will transform the whole industry, it will, but I don't have a specific.
I also don't focus on the healthcare space, so I wouldn't try to report that I know. But with the healthcare companies that I do work with, because of HIPAA requirements, because of the sensitivity of customer data, their use cases for generative AI that we're building and helping them build are all internal facing. So the first one being smart search, right? So within healthcare, it can get very nuanced on a policy, a plan, if you're a payer or provider, what you qualify for, right? And so helping the representatives access that information much faster and with less error is a real use case that I've seen organizations that, again, are in these highly regulated industries begin with, because it's safer and it does contribute to both the employee experience and engagement, but also the end patient experience. Well, thank you. We appreciate
Thanks.
the time. Thank you so much.